and welcome back to Berthelots Can Cook. It's the episode everyone's been waiting for, Ryan's Pizza. So I should say it's Ryan inspired, because if I was really using his whole recipe, I'd be using fresh ingredients. Basil and fresh tomatoes would be great. It's not happening today. That being said, we're going to be doing the dough first. So we're going to be using beer, which was one of Ryan's secret ingredients, olive oil, salt, 4.5 cups of flour. We need a bit of yeast as well as a bit of sugar. So we're going to want to have our beer somewhat room temperature because the yeast gets activated with the warmth. So we're going to be using 1.5 cups, and half of that is going to be beer and the other half is going to be warm water. He actually said 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not going to go to the level of taking the temperature, but we'll start with this. So this seems so dark. Anyway, I was kind of hoping for a light beer because I don't want it to affect the taste, but we'll try it. Okay, I am going to now add the water and put the yeast in. So we're putting in 2 teaspoons. Let me use my apron. Okay. Actually, it's good that it's fresh. Mom told me yesterday if you leave it out too long, it becomes inactive. So it should always be refrigerated afterwards. Okay, so we're gonna do 2 teaspoons. I wanna make sure because I don't want this to be a flop. 2 teaspoons of yeast, and we're gonna dissolve that in there. I can see, I've made this before actually one other time, and it was really good. Compared to store-bought pizza, fresh pizza is the bee's knees, as they say. So we're just gonna let that dissolve in there for a bit, and while it does, I'm going to be mixing my flour, sugar, and salt. Okay, so we're gonna take 4.5 cups of flour. Probably gonna speed this part up. See, the video is going to be interrupted again shortly. Okay, and we want to make sure our countertop is quite clean because we're going to be kneading the dough, which is going to move on to the countertop. It's going to be taking 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Oops, sorry, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. You can get it over. I mean, this video is gonna be... Okay, I'm not gonna painstakingly do this while you're watching. 1.5 teaspoons of salt and 2 tablespoons of sugar, but we could substitute with honey if we'd like to. And then we're also going to be adding 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the mix, and I'll come back when I have my ingredients in a place where you can see them being put together. Okay, so I'm not mundo impressed with the beer because it was a dark beer. It had a lot of flavor in it, but I just want to show that the yeast has to be quite dissolved. Like when I first started stirring it, there were still clumps in it. And then you're going to want to make sure that your dry ingredients are well mixed before you're adding your beer and water. And we're also going to be adding our oil to this, which is important ingredient. So 2 tablespoons of oil, and I think I'm gonna add that to the wet. Yeah, it looks good. So we're gonna be doing this in a couple parts. We're gonna be mixing this, kneading it, and then we're gonna be putting it aside in a warm area for at least an hour to rise. And during that time, we're gonna be working on the sauce. I'm actually making Hawaiian pizza because I have extra ham that was a bone-in ham that was already cooked, so it has a nice flavor. And then I have some pineapple and some mozzarella cheese. So I'm going to be mixing this all together. Ooh, looks good already. I love dough. smells delicious. I know you can't smell it, but it smells really good. Okay, so you obviously want to make sure your hands are clean as well as your countertop. And then you're going to be mixing and kneading this with your hands. So now we are going to cover the dough with a cloth. Isn't this the perfect little cloth? And leave it in a warm area, maybe on top of the fridge for an hour. We are now moving on to the sauce. I just wanted to show you the ingredients. Really finely chopped onions and garlic, and I'm not going overboard because I think my kids rather be kind of plain. Basil, which would be so nice if it was fresh. Olive oil. This is some diced tomatoes that I had left over from yesterday, and some tomato paste. I also have some Italian seasoning from Vittoria Trattoria, and of course salt and pepper and a bit of sugar. Ryan, one of his tips was I could have added some of my favorite spices to the dough, and also he swears by this kind of tomato, San Marzano tomato. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. So I want my heat to be quite low. I'm just going to be simmering these ingredients. I really don't want them to get browned at all. So I'm going to be moving my oil, covering my bottom of my pan as per usual. And then I'm going to be putting in these fine chopped, I repeat, fine chopped ingredients. And I'm just going to be honestly simmering those for quite some time until they're clear and almost no liquid is left. Okay, well these little babies are pretty perfect. I'm now going to be adding my tomato paste. I love tomato paste. Like, I could actually eat it straight. I'm using quite a lot. Like, I'm using a crazy amount, but I actually think it's going to make for a nice sauce. I'm going to mix it in with my garlic and onions. Yep. That's delicious looking, but as you can see, quite thick. So at this point, I'm going to be adding in my diced tomatoes. And I'm only making 2 small pizzas, so I don't need a tremendous amount of sauce. At this point, I'm going to be adding some salt, as well as some pepper, fresh ground as usual, a little bit of Italian seasoning, and I think quite a lot of basil. I can't stress how much this would be better with fresh basil. However, work with what you got. And a little bit of sugar to cut down on the acidity in the tomatoes. I like when tomato or pizza sauces have a bit of sweetness to them. So now we're going to let this cook on low for quite some time and reduce. I'm also going to be adding just a little bit of white wine to it. And we're going to let that reduce for quite some time. So far, so good. I just wanted to show you what the tomato sauce looked like, which was quite good. So now I'm working on my toppings. I love Hawaiian pizza. So we have some pineapple here. Really important that it's drained and patted dry because you don't want to add a lot of moisture to the top of the pizza. You know when it's soggy and gross in the middle? Ugh. And then this is going to be the perfect ham. because it's already been baked and cooked, and it was a spiral ham, so it's all in small pieces. Close to bacon, which is the best case scenario. And then a lot of mozzarella cheese. We're gonna be coating the dough with a little bit of olive oil and basil, and we're just gonna be brushing on it before it goes in the oven. By the way, the oven needs to be at like 500 degrees. Now, some recipes tell you to pre-bake the dough naked without any ingredients on it for maybe 5 minutes at a lower temperature and then put the ingredients on it. But I actually made this before and that wasn't an issue, especially because I have this pan which has aeration under it. It actually cooks quite well. So once we put the pizza in, it's only going to need to cook for like 10 minutes. So we're going to be doing 2 different rounds of it, and we're going to get to the dough in a second. Guys, it's the best part, the dough. Okay, so we're going to be making this into a half and then spreading it out onto our floured surface. I could say it probably could have risen for a little bit longer. I also think I could have reduced it to 4 cups instead of 4.5, just based on the moisture, but it's a good texture. Look at it. I could almost do what they do in a movie. It's really playing out here. Okay, I'm gonna stretch this out as much as I can before putting it down onto the flour. This is good, looks great. I also don't want my dough to be super thick. I don't love those really thick crust pizzas. I want it to be relatively thin. So press it out. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. Good. I'm actually mundo impressed with this dough piece. Like, look at the consistency. Now we're gonna put it down on this. I can see it's thinner in some places than others. And I'm just gonna grab my fingers and coat it with a bit of this spiced oils, obviously, especially along the edges where it's going to be cooking in the oven. This is amazing. I literally should do this more often. I've already tried the dough and it's delicious. So the beer obviously didn't affect it. Ben, I know. Sorry, there was a difference of opinion over here on that. This looks gorgeous. I'm so satisfied. We're gonna be making 2. The sauce is delicious. It's really good. We're gonna be taking about half the amount of sauce and spreading it over our pizza. You don't want it to be too thick. I don't want it to be, I hate those bites where it's like, I just ate a whole tomato, ma. Okay. This is nice. Okay. Okay, that looks great. Stone oven type pizza. And then tons of mozzarella cheese, because who doesn't love cheese? It's probably it is my favorite food. Cheese is my favorite food. Doesn't always love me back in the same kind of way, but that's for another time. Okay, so obviously once we have the cheese, we're gonna add some of the ham as well as our pineapple, and we have a Hawaiian pizza on our hands, people. This is what the pizza looks like before it goes in. Pulled this out of the oven after 10 minutes and it is sheer perfection. I did turn it halfway through, as in spin the plate around, because it's hotter at the back of the oven, but this has been by far my favorite recipe. Bye guys.